just focusing on one platform? Is it that you can reduce overwhelm for your client? Do you think it's a level of, like, we sometimes overthink what's valuable, we overprocess, we overthink, oh, what about this post? Maybe this isn't valuable.
If you're trying to strive for the perfect post, it's then going to become a bit of a time drain, and it's become extra stress.
How do you, is it just like relying on motivation?
Yeah, I mean, if I don't get it done, nobody else is going to get it done. That's a pretty strong motivation.
Sometimes it's not worth the headache. A lot of people were saying AI is going to take our jobs.
People will still buy from people. People will still want to learn from people.
I think for me, the people who are going to stand apart are the ones who are going to use it to accelerate what they're doing and not replace them.
Believe in yourself more.
Thank you for your time, Dan.
Thank you.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to a brand new episode. Today we're going to be talking to Dan, who's a social media consultant. And so Dan, just before we start, I mean, do you do just management? Do you help people with content? Like, let's just paint that picture for people who are maybe interested.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on this afternoon. Well, I am a social media trainer, social media manager, originally from Devon, now based in Bournemouth. And I work with service-based business owners, so local business owners that need more local clients. So the service is basically helping business owners. So that's through social media training, one-to-one, or maybe in a group setting to help them do it better for themselves. More specifically, that could be help with Facebook, advertising training, the basics of Instagram, or maybe improving their LinkedIn profile as well. So there's that side of it. The other side of it is more for the established businesses that have been in business for some time that need a presence because they just don't have, they've already got the customers, they're already really busy. And I help save them time by doing the social media management for them. So, for example, doing LinkedIn posts on a weekly basis, sort of like on a monthly retainer, coming up with different ideas for content for them through that as well, and just giving them a fresh start to social media, really.
What do you think people either get wrong in marketing right now, or like what are the missed opportunities, would you say, as a whole, in marketing at the moment, either specifically on social media or actually wider spread in more traditional marketing space, would you say?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my bread and butter is the social media marketing side of things. And I think the big thing for me at the moment, and this has been the case for the last sort of 9 years of doing this, is that there's so much noise out there and so much overwhelm for business owners that it can be a real struggle. And I'm not talking about the people that have got big teams or in-house marketing departments. I'm talking about the people running businesses on their own. They've got a solid business and they've got something that people want, but they're frustrated because they don't know what to do in terms of social, and they have so much conflicting bits of advice from people out there, and maybe they watch some videos on YouTube and that advice isn't really tailored to their business. Maybe it's more for creators or influencers, for example, and they get lost in all this noise. And rather than just really nailing and focusing on one platform that could really help their business grow, they then spread themselves too thinly, and they're trying to do a bit of this, they're trying to do a bit of that because they've heard their friends say they need to be doing this, they need to be doing that, when ultimately, they've got a business to run. They haven't got all the time to do that. So that is what a lot of the service has been over the last 9 years, is working with those people that maybe haven't grown up with social media. And that's truly my passion, to sort of empower them to use it for their businesses. And sometimes, they're a little bit nervous, they've got technophobia, and they're scared to. And I think you said about missed opportunities. I think when you take a step back and look at things, like let's rewind the clock, maybe I'm thinking about times here, 20 years ago, maybe. I think I'm looking at, yeah, maybe a little bit more, but you've got a chance to be in front of a camera and speak to your audience all across the world, or all across the country, or whatever the context may be. And that's not an opportunity you had all that time ago. And this is, obviously the way we are now with smartphones and social media. We're so used to it, so embedded into our day-to-day culture, that it's quite interesting to just take a little bit of a step back and realize the opportunity you've got there to build that emotional connection with people that are following you as well. And I've seen it time and time again. I'm talking about like supplement shops and fitness shops back in Torbay, just doing simple videos, and that's just a great way to get yourself out there, get people to know, like, and trust you, really.
You mentioned that you mainly focus on one platform, right? And I think that's a misconception sometimes, because I think people, when they work with me or when we work with you, etc., maybe we look at, like, let's dominate across all of the platforms because we have a larger reach, we can reuse our content, etc. But I guess on the other side of that, what would you say is the pro to just focusing on one platform? Is it that you can reduce overwhelm for your client, perhaps? Is it kind of one of those things that some people say, like, you start on one, then you build to two, then you build to three? Are you, because the counter argument would be, like, are we putting all of our eggs in one basket, right? And are we concerned, like, let's for example, if you're business to business, which a lot of my audience is, okay, then you should just solely focus on creating LinkedIn content, right? I mean, is that the case, would you say?
I think it's different for each business owner in terms of where they're at in their journey. So if you're starting out, I think, like you said, it's good, as we both agree on, it's good to focus on one platform and then you can move on to another. It just depends the resource that you've got, the budget that you've got, time that you've got as well. So if you really, like you mentioned, obviously the example of business owners, really focused on LinkedIn, focused on the content, you've got a strategy for direct messaging, you're not just spray and pray, hoping for the best, you've got time, and you can build a tailored, solid audience of people that actually need your service. Then it just gives you that clear focus. And some people have got a better aptitude or sort of natural flair for it anyway, really. So maybe using LinkedIn and maybe Facebook, and in some cases, with LinkedIn and using the Facebook personal profile in professional mode, like a lot of people do, you can then repurpose some content as well, because some of that content can be suitable for both, but each platform has its own quirks. So I think, yes, if you're starting out, then starting on one platform and really focusing on getting that right, getting the right audience, getting the right content, not overcomplicating things. That's a big thing, really. So yeah.
I think there's I guess, a question on volume. Like, that was gonna be my next question in respect to, like, there is a nature to social media where you have to do a level of volume, especially at the start, to be able to gain enough data to understand what works and what people resonate with and what people really enjoy. But, personally, just for the audience's sake, and maybe your case as well, I've been very fortunate where my new marketing strategy of saying yes and, so this is a very volume dominated approach, because value is subjective, so I always try to add value in content, of course, but for me, I've been a very, very focused on daily output as the metric, and then overall arching numbers in regards to views, watch times, growth, etc., for that window of time across a month, for example. And I think if I'll put on the screen if I get it wrong, but I think it's around 200k at the moment per month that we're hitting across 5 platforms. Of course, that will change by the time this comes out, but at the time of recording, it's around there. And I think when I talk about those big numbers, I think people find them very intimidating, and they can find that maybe it is because of, like, the volume, or it's because, like, I'm very seasoned in knowing how to create content in volume but also high value. What advice would you give to someone who's maybe looking at that approach, I mean, firstly, would you agree with that approach, number one? Number two, what advice would you give to someone who is maybe looking at what I'm doing and seeing success in, and maybe wants to emulate it as a whole, from a volume perspective, from a distribution perspective, and I guess in some ways, how do we check in with, is that in line with making our boat go faster, but also, are we overwhelming ourselves as a creator?
Yeah, sure. I think at the end of the day, like you said, volume is important. I mean, that's certainly what I'm focusing on, and how we connected through the Facebook personal profile that I've switched into professional mode, like most people do, because my audience is getting bigger and bigger. I'm just keeping it simple, getting people into a Facebook group, and it just becomes a numbers game, really, essentially. But having said that, like, obviously this opportunity came up a few weeks ago to speak to you. I've had other opportunities have come up as well from just having those sheer numbers on, Facebook professional profile is my biggest audience, if you like. So there's a lot of scope for that, really. And
Do you think it's a level of like we as in the royal we as in everyone maybe listening or us, we sometimes overthink what's valuable, we overprocess, we overthink, oh, what about this post, right? What about this? Oh, maybe this isn't valuable. Because when I kind of, it's not that I'm not having a threshold of what's worthy, but I'm letting the audience tell me what's valuable in regards to their views, in regards to their likes, in regards to their numbers, in regards to their comments, etc. Do you think that's like one of the things that people need to get into the habit of doing? Because I think sometimes we get so close to perfectionism that we don't actually execute on all the ideas that we maybe have as business owners for great marketing or great social media.
Yeah, I mean, working like one-to-one with a lot of clients, talking service-based business owners, and it sometimes it's a case of getting over yourself and just posting things. Sometimes things will flop, sometimes things will take off in terms of your post, and you'll be surprised by it, really. And you can only learn by experimenting as well, really. And in terms of business, I'm guilty sometimes of, in my early stages, of overthinking things and not executing. Whereas actually, if you execute, then you learn more as you go along. And I think that there's no such. I think if you're trying to strive for the perfect post, and I'm not talking so much from a creator perspective, or I'm talking more from a business owner perspective, looking to generate more local clients, for example. That you just it's then going to become a bit of a time drain, and it's become extra stress rather than. And this is the importance of having like your content pillars in place, so you know what you're posting about, and you're just keeping it simple. It doesn't have to be anything earth shattering. You've got your content pillars in place, you know what your themes are, you know what your topics are, you can brainstorm your ideas, and you can have a bit of fun with it. And it's just always key. That's why I'm so passionate about content marketing. It's always just so key to have your audience in mind. I think, are you speaking directly to your audience? Or are you just trying to speak to everybody, or speak quite broadly, and then missing the mark with everyone, really?
Yeah, I mean, as a whole, I think, like, especially when we start out, we maybe worry about, as I say, like getting into that. What if people don't like the post, or what if like people don't like me, or etc. And we lean into that kind of like, oh, I'm gonna sound stupid on camera, or like, oh my god, I'm talking on my phone, what a weirdo, that kind of thing. I mean, it's a similar feeling to, I think, when we start networking, and I did want to touch on it a little bit with networking. I mean, personally, I've stepped away from networking, like the traditional sense of going to a room, about a year and a half ago. But the reason for that is, like, for me, like, it's just a scale thing, right? I'm at a stage where I'm very fortunate, where I've got a good number of clients, and whenever I do my marketing, I need it to be efficient and also scalable. So, and there could be arguments, and there is arguments, I'm sure, to say, well, actually, no, that's the time when you should be doubled down onto networking and etc. and etc. But for those people who are maybe starting out and really focusing on like maybe they're in the first year, right? What would you say like they should do if they're nervous about being on camera, they're nervous about going to a networking event, or they're nervous about speaking in front of a room, or those I think pillars of any business to build, right? Because I think when I talk about networking now, it's from the context of I'm nearly a 10-year-old business, and in my first 5 years, I heavily networked. So I'm leaning on that network now. It's not that it's not valuable. It's kind of the season I was in business for me personally. I mean, just to reiterate the question, I mean, how did you personally, when you started networking, like tackle those fears and those challenges and those concerns around like, oh my god, I've got to talk to people who I don't know. Oh my god, I've got to potentially like introduce myself like in a network in 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, I started doing it back in 2015, and I wasn't actually, my business started in 2016, but I started writing a blog about social media, how it impacts businesses in the Torbay area. And they had Torbay hour meetings in the local area, and there was, guys that were running marketing agencies that were helping people with social media. So I thought, well, that would be good. I just did a Google search and then found it, and I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. Because it's quite a small town, so go along to that and see what happens. And I guess, I'm quite, I'm quite at ease speaking to people that I don't know. I quite enjoy it. But
Sorry to cut you off, but do you think that comes from the experience you've had of nearly doing it for a decade now?
yeah, I think, from like going to university of 20 years ago now or whatever, and getting used to that situation of meeting people, and it's still nerve-wracking, particularly like when you introduce yourself on network. And even I did networking this morning online, you still get that little bit of like, oh, you know. And I think in terms of guidance, I think it's just everyone's in the same boat. That's a good way to look at it. And you know, it gives you that, it's character building, and it gives you that extra energy and that motivation. So I went to a networking event in Southbourne here locally in Bournemouth last week. It was last Wednesday morning about 8:30, and it was just a really nice positive start to the day. And particularly if you're working on your business on your own and you're on a laptop, you're on a PC, on your phone, it's just good to get that real connection as well. And it also holds you to account, so that you know have to keep your standards high as well, and you're out there sort of like in the real world and learning from people and picking up little bits of advice, little sort of bits of information as well. So and I get that, you know, for some people it can be really overwhelming to go to sort of physical networking. So maybe start with like a smaller group, you know, or something a bit more informal, or online networking as well, just to sort of dip your feet in the water, so to speak, and then learn as you go along.
I remember when I was like really getting into networking, I don't think I ever actually had it, but I know that I know there was a conversation about maybe don't specifically look at the room very tactically, right? So don't look at the room and go, oh, I work with this characteristic of person, so the only people I'm going to talk to is those people. I mean, have you found in your experience that actually the people who give you the most referrals, because that's why we go to networking, right, is to work through the room rather than work directly in the room? Do you find the people who maybe you get the most work from, or potentially get the most referrals from, or goodwill from, aren't who you would necessarily expect?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was an example last October when there was a Bournemouth Business Festival locally, quite a big event to be fair, and went along to that, did speed networking. And this is the thing, that day I was going to Alicante, and I had the option of basically getting my flight earlier in the day or later in the day. So I could have started my holiday earlier, basically, but I decided to go. I said, I've got to go to this event. I can't miss it. I went to the event, made some connections. There was no direct interest in my services on that day, but there were a couple of interesting people I met in speed networking. So I followed up with them. And then, you know, one of them was involved with lead generation, but I wasn't going into that call expecting, oh, she's going to have some clients to refer to me. It was just like, you know, we had a really nice conversation. She was local. Let's just jump on a Zoom call for 20 minutes or so and just carry that conversation on. And sort of this is the thing, when you're not attached like that, I just find that opportunities present themselves. Whereas if you, and you know, I was probably guilty of this at the start of, oh, who should I speak to get this? Rather than just going in, being open, this is what I do, this is who I help, what about yourself? And, you know, you sort of go in, sort of, a bit of a cliche, but it's very true that you go there to build relationships. And obviously the purpose of all relationships, it's not, you know, take. Obviously you go to a relationship to give. So that's just the attitude that I have to it now, really. And it often is the case that when you're least expecting it, you have a conversation with someone, you think, oh, this person is not necessarily going to need my services, but they, you know, you never know who they know. And yeah, so it's all about circulating.
I mean, obviously we both work very strongly online, right? And I think, would it be fair to say we're maybe chronically online, right? As in, like, there's not, speaking personally anyway, there's not a day where I'm not connected or not having some level of internet conversation related to something related to work, right? For example, whether that's through my phone or computer or a podcast or whatever. So even when I do meet people in person, it's normally about what we're doing online. And I guess, I mean, the question that I was going to kind of lead on to that was like, at what point, and this is maybe a personal question, like, so maybe answer it from your perspective, because I think it will be different for everyone. When do you try and detox? Like, and then how do you go about doing that from a digital detox perspective? Because it's not something I did for the last couple of years, but now I'm like chronically online as much. I'm actually trying to like really focus on having maybe a couple of windows a day, like maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 2 hours of just not being connected to the internet, like mentally, just like obviously my phone is still connected, so right, stuff can happen, but like I'm not actually, my phone's out of the way, my computer's out of the way, I'm not looking at it, thinking about it, you know. how do you do that? And if so, like, how did you build that habit?
Well, like yourself, I just became very aware of it a couple of years ago that my whole world was like online, essentially, and it just started to feel really unhealthy. And I think it's a problem that a lot of people encounter and maybe people aren't aware of. So you probably saw, I did a post recently about this July digital detox challenge. It came up, obviously on a Facebook ad, ironically, but fair enough. And I thought, well, let's give this a go. And it's things that I've been putting into practice over the last few years, really. So using the Minimalist app on my phone, I pay a fee for that each year, and that helps make my phone become more of a tool, which essentially it is, and look a bit more boring. So it's not got all those shortcuts and visual cues to sort of entice me in. And yeah, I mean, for example, like last night, met my friend, went to the beach, very lucky to sort of live near to the beach. And I just look at that circumstance and it's like, I don't need to be on my phone. Obviously, if a family member calls, the phone is still there. If it's something urgent, somebody will call. And that time is precious because it just gives you that time away. But I think a lot of this comes to building healthier habits. I think people just aren't aware a lot of times that they're doing it they're doing it subconsciously, really, where let's say two friends are at a bar watching the football, one pops off to the bar, the other one's straight on their phone. The friend's only going to be gone for a couple of minutes, but it's just an instinctive all waiting at the bus or whatever. And I'm not saying that's the worst thing in the world, but the thing with it is, obviously we're business owners, we're busy people, we got a lot to process and we got a lot of things we got to think about, and that creativity can come through silence. And certainly for me, like lunch times, dinner times, that's just a time where I'm not on the phone. And I'm not like anyone, I'm no saint or perfect. There might be a time where there's something on YouTube and maybe I'm just listening to it and in the background, but 8 times out of 10, just make that time to not be on it, because it's something I'm very passionate about, because it's just not healthy. And I know it gives us the opportunity to connect with people, like I said, all across the world at all times. And it gives us a chance and more opportunities. But at the same point, you've got to balance that out with you. Well, you need the energy for the next day. If I was on my phone a lot last night, there's no real downtime. So I would highly recommend people to look at this digital detox challenge and just take a step back, because you'll be much better for it.
I think that's an important point, and I would tackle it from a perspective of like, how present are you in the moment, right? And how present are you with your parent? How present are you with your partner? How present are you with that friend? How present are you with yourself, right? And I think that's sometimes what we don't look at, right? Is sometimes actually, like, as busy people, especially as you get older, you get into a relationship, you want to continue to build your relationship, of course, with your parents, etc., etc., and then maybe you have a friendship circle, you want to be social and so on. We spend all this time, or we spend working, or we spend doing a task or whatever, we spend all this time out, and we don't, I think, well, on average, unless you make a habit of it, to actually spend the time looking in and working on ourselves and, etc. And for me, something that I've always had is that's why I do fitness, because it forces me into this point of view where there is no other distractions. Maybe I've got music on, or maybe I'm listening to a podcast or whatever, but from the crux, sometimes I'll just like go on the run, go for the workout, I won't put headphones in, I'm just there with my thoughts, and that's deliberate, because sometimes I'll need to process things, or like I need to just check in with myself and see. But I think it does open up, like, you need to be present. I think you can actually show up better for those other people I was alluding to, if you are willing to allocate that time to have the, alone time with yourself, or etc. And sometimes for some people that can be really hard, but something that I did want to ask you about is, obviously we both work online, we both work on social media, and these platforms are designed to hook our attention in, right, and for us to consume content. And if you're doing content correctly, you'll know how this works with hooks and call to actions and value adds and, having text on screen and all these like tricks psychologically. How do you, as a social media manager or social media consultant, however you want to think about it, like, go on social media to do a task, whether that's posting or whether that's like market research or equivalent, when you're like consuming that, not be drawn into that content, especially on TikTok, for example?
Yeah, it's super hard. I mean, particularly with Instagram as well, and how the algorithms work. Like it's difficult because you can get sucked into a vortex. But Facebook personal profile, professional mode that I mentioned before, it's hard, and sometimes it's literally just like you just have to snap out of it. And also from a digital wellness point of view as well, looking at my feed and once again seeing, is this actually helping my state of mind? I use, like, for clients, I use Buffer, for example, so that's like a nice clean environment. So I'm there for the purpose of, I've got Canva open, scheduling posts, and there's no distractions, and that's great. And obviously Meta Business Suite as well for other clients, that's useful, so that I'm just in that content management mode rather than that. But like you said about market research or whatever it may be, I might have had a conversation with someone on LinkedIn and think, I need to follow up with them, and then posts come along and
LinkedIn's got you now.
yeah, it's got me. So you just get sucked. So it is hard because as much as you can have all these tools, we're only human, and obviously we both know how it works. So it's just a case of being aware. I know I haven't really got like a more refined answer than that, but it's just a case of putting yourself back into the room, as they say.
I think to an extent how I look at it anyway is I could potentially see it as a reward engine. Like, I don't actually, to be honest, I don't really consume on TikTok or socials anymore. Not really. Like, I'm a big YouTube watcher, sure, but that's when I'm trying to actually do research or trying to learn or equivalent, right? But like, outside of that, I don't really consume content, and that's just because I've trained my mind not to go down that rabbit hole. But when I did, I would always do it in a respect of, like, if you do X task, then you can spend 20 minutes on TikTok. Like, completely cool, completely fair, scroll through your heart's content, And I think, I mean, to an extent, that kind of, in some ways, that leans into my next question, which is going to be around, like, what lessons have you learned from, like, growing a business, or what lessons have you learned as a whole, like, in your business journey? But I think for me, just before I pass back to you, I think using that reward pathway and using that, like, you do a thing, then you get a reward, I think is really key, because it allows you to still have the things you enjoy, but it also allows you to not feel then guilty about enjoying those things because you've tied it to an outcome, right? So, I need to get this work done for a client. Okay, cool. When the work is done for a client, I can then do the thing I enjoy. But just to reiterate, what lessons specifically have you learned? What specific lessons have you kind of taken from it? So maybe like the last 5 years, perhaps, or maybe the last year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's lots of lessons. I mean, a big thing for me has been personal development, knowing that I'm my business, I run my business, and the more I invest in myself, the more I'll get back from my business because I'm a stronger person. And I definitely think, particularly over the last, I'd say, like 2 years, I've been much more focused on tapping into, like, the local business community as well, and not feeling so alone, and joining the online networking groups like Latte and Live, Oni, Entrepreneur Circle. You can just be with people in the same boat as well, and I really appreciate those opportunities to connect with people, and because it's very easy to just sort of be in that solo mode and kind of isolated in that sense. So that's a big thing. And I think as well, kind of not being afraid to fail as well and learning from failures. That's obviously a big pressure, but certainly the more you fail, the more you learn. That's one of the big things I've learned as well, and not also, I think it's probably a thing that a lot of people can relate with, not being your harshest critic, as much as I am a lot of times my own harshest critic, because I want to keep doing better and everything. Giving yourself some slack as well.
I think there's a difference to, like, when you, so for example, every single client shoot I've ever had, I've always done a debrief afterwards. And the point of that debrief isn't for me to beat myself up on what I didn't do well. It's to say, sick, you did it, client seems to be happy, things seem to be going well, cool, but what if we could make it better, right? And I think for me, those debriefs allow me to make those 1% improvements, so that by the end of the year, I'm 37 times better at my craft than I was a year ago. And it kind of, to an extent, leans into maybe what you touched on a little bit about the networking thing and, like, building those longer term connections. But what role would you say that community it's kind of a buzzword now, but like community as a whole, or having a community of business owners around you, whether that's digitally interacting with content and you're both kind of both interacting with content, or physically at a networking group, or maybe like check-in circles, or etc., however you want to do it, or accountability partners, so on, so on. There's loads of ways to do it. What role would you say that community element actually has for your business, but in general as a business owner?
I mean, one of my values, is tied in with community as well, because I've been involved with lots of communities in the past. I was involved with a YouTube channel, Elite FPL. That was a big part of that channel, was, and still is, being part of a community, a sort of online worldwide community that are passionate about fantasy football. And then, being part of these networking groups, like Latte Live that I mentioned before, Oni, Entrepreneur Circle, and the local business events as well. I use Patch, which is a local workspace in Bournemouth. So once again, without wanting to spout out another cliche, you're not on the journey on your own, and you've got other people to bounce ideas off. You can learn different things from different people, even from their challenges, which they might have a different business to you, but then you can relate it back to your own business as well. And it's definitely the thing of keeping you to account and helping you kind of keep on progress as well with your peers, if you like, really, so that you're not kind of snacking behind as well. And I think as well, mentioned it before, like when you asked about people that are new to networking, certainly confidence building. When I, once again, a few years ago, started to go to more local events in Bournemouth because I wanted to get more known in the local area. I was quite nervous rocking up to these big events, and that has lessened, and I've actually started to embrace and look forward to it as time has gone on. So it's been quite, confidence building as well.
Mm. I think I think sometimes when we look at business owners, or we look at maybe someone's social media, it's very highlight orientated, so that can naturally like build your confidence, but also it can go the other way. I think sometimes where people often wonder, or often worry about, like, what if they're not doing well, right? And I think something that I'm very proud of is actually whenever things aren't doing well, I've taken 100% accountability for that, but also number two, I've also like be willing to be open and share it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm potentially, from people who watch my content consistently, they tell me like, you're a human, right? So like, it's not like this, like, oh, things are going super well and etc. And I hope it makes me perceived, or makes me believe, that I'm more humble than maybe others. But it kind of does link into my next question, which was going to be around, obviously business doesn't always go well for whatever reason. I mean, do you have a specific either set of challenges, or like a larger set of challenges that you're willing to share, that also like how you then overcame those challenges, more importantly? Because I think sometimes it's important for us to share a level of vulnerability there, but also share to the point where like actually it can be a tool to show like, no, don't go down there because there's a bear there, for example, right? I mean, have you had any challenges like that you're willing to share, and how you then fix them?
Yeah, massively. I mean, it's constantly every day's a school day, as they say, and you're constantly learning. So, I mean, there've been challenges before where I started out just working with solopreneurs, working just with a couple of businesses, and then end up working with lots of businesses all at once, and having to put all the sort of foundations in place to do that, and not always getting it right, and making things that I regret, things that I wish I'd done differently. But making that transition hasn't always been easy. I'm talking about sort of organization and things like that, and running things smoothly, and you don't know what you know till you know it, as they say. So once you go from, I had a period where I was just, running a few social media accounts, doing some training here and there, to then running social media training for big groups, 20, 30 people every day, and just feeling overwhelmed at the time, really. And because I didn't have the infrastructure in place in terms of like the admin, or the tech side, really. And, you are learning the hard way, really. But I think once you move past that and invest in your business more, like invested in business mentorship and training, and then the thing is, once you've had that experience and things haven't necessarily gone always how you'd like them to go. And then you do training and it goes really well, you get really good feedback, and you think, oh, actually, I've learned from that experience. I now moved on. I'm a stronger person for it. And, you sort of feel confident in yourself again.
I think it's like there is probably a psychological term, something on the lines of the survivor. It's not survivor bias. There's something else there, but it's basically the crux of it is things happened to me. I survived it, so it gives then a knock-on effect to my confidence, because I know I can survive that again if it was to happen again. And I think for me, as someone who's been, could say in some ways turbulent, had business turbulence, etc., like, and I'm sure everyone has within reason, I think it's one of those things where to an extent you have to lean into what you knew worked previously, but also be trusting in the self that you'll figure it out. And sometimes there's challenges in business, sometimes there's challenges with retainer clients, there's challenges with project clients, there's challenges as a whole. And I think it's about how you approach when things aren't going as well as you would like them to, is what really will stand you apart, firstly from your client perception point of view, but also from a marketing point of view. And I think it comes from you. And I think especially is like whether you have a team or whether you're the leader or whether it's just you plus freelancers or just you, I think it has to, regardless, the inner work has to come from you. I mean, my next question was going to be around like, how do you balance, or how do you lean into motivation? Like, are you strong in discipline in respect to like when times are hard and you know that the thing you have to do is show up and do the work? How do you sort of push through that? Is it just like relying on motivation, or is it just solely down to, because my view's always been like, it's solely just down to, if you got to get shit done, you just got to push through it with the self-care and understanding that you can give yourself a time when you fix the problem, but there is a level of just, you have to be disciplined to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't get it done, nobody else is going to get it done. So I think, and it's all, that's a pretty strong motivation, really. I think when the chips are down, a lot of time that's when I come out fighting in a way, really. And it's just, yeah, it's not always easy. And but I think once again, when you run your own business, you're reliant on yourself, and that is a test of your character anyway, and it helps you grow even more. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's always been easy, and that there haven't been times that I've hid, for example, when there's been opportunities or there's been networking where I've maybe gone into my shell a little bit. But I think, and this, I don't know how to say this, but like when you have like an employed job, there probably are times where you're working and you sort of what you got to do, and then your neck isn't always on the line. Whereas when you're running your own business, you haven't necessarily got those safety nets in place. I'm not saying that having an employed job is not pressured at all, but
I think it's different, right? And I think even if you have a retainer, and even if you have a pot of money, and even if you've done the financial work and you've done the money management work and etc., you still, from your core, don't like losing a client, right? Personally, I don't. I never like saying goodbye to a client, or deciding to part ways with a client, or a client deciding that as well. And normally it's a mutual like thing when that happens, right? But I think for me it comes down to, sometimes you've just like you've added the value you can add, and as you do it more, you'll understand that it's just part of the process sometimes, like especially if you're growing yourself, like as your expectations or like etc., like there's only a certain line that you're willing to go, especially if your expectations are rising. But also it needs to work for both people, and sometimes regardless of like the project or like the client or the retainer or even the job, sometimes it's not worth the headache. And if you're fortunate enough to be in a position where you've got the pot of money, you've done the financial resources, and you've done the financial work to be able to maybe step away and say, actually, no, I don't need to accept that anymore, then great. If you are not in that position, then like I would say work on that to get to that position. But also I think, and I was going to ask you about like what your plans are for maybe like the rest of the year, because we're filming this roughly around the middle of 25, which is weird to say because it just feels like we were in January, but it always seems to be the way. I mean, what do you want ideally, like either for you, or do you think like from a marketing point of view, do you think like is there going to be any like drastic shift, or like is there any opportunities that people who may be listening to this could take advantage of in the next 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I I do the social media training and management I talked about, and that you touched upon like the community as well, shifting towards like a group membership, a community where I teach business owners in a community, and the community work together. So that's something I'm really excited about launching sort of towards the end of the summer. So there's going to be a networking opportunities within that, and different scope for working with like a group together rather than just working with single business owners in isolation, if you like. So I'm looking forward to that as well. I mean, we've not really spoke about AI, but obviously that presents a lot of opportunity. Well, massive opportunities for people that are looking to learn how to use it for their businesses as well. So there's scope for that. And yeah, I mean, talked about the digital well-being side of things as well. That seems to be something that I've seen come up in terms of courses or help for digital well-being as well. So there's different areas, and it's just seeing how viable those areas are and how much support people need, really.
You mentioned AI. I mean, where do you see it? Because for a long time, a lot of people were saying AI is going to take our jobs. Then it sort of became the person who's utilizing AI is likely going to take your job. Where do you sit on it?
Well, I mean, I think that at the moment, obviously, I use it as a sort of virtual AI assistant, and from like a content marketing perspective, it can give you so many ideas and so much support. But ultimately, still, I've still seen people doing this where the copy is clearly AI generated, and it loses the tone. So I think in terms of like from our perspective, people will still need us to help maybe teach them how to use it. And also use it as prompts, use the machine as prompts as well to get content and do it for them. So it's still an amazing tool, really. And yeah, I just think it's very interesting times in terms of the opportunities it presents for particularly content generation for those business owners that don't necessarily have like the tech skills to use editing software to put together really amazing content as well. So yeah, it's exciting times, but I still, taking a step back from that, people will still buy from people. People will still want to learn from people. It's just harnessing those opportunities to do that, really.
Yeah, the analogy that I started using is you need to, with AI, in the same way you would use a knife, you need to sharpen the knife before you use it. And I think the analogy I used that before is it's a tool to be used. You don't need a hammer for everything. You would sometimes use a screwdriver to put up shelves, for example. But I think for me, the people who are going to stand apart are the ones who are going to use it to accelerate what they're doing and not replace them. But I think I think at the moment, especially in corporate, there's a big push towards let's cut costs, let's cut costs, let's cut costs, and it's probably synergized with maybe the uncertainty, you could say, in the economy. I don't like mentioning it because, like, for me, it's like it's always been there. There's always been a level of uncertainty. There always will be something going on, and I think if you focus on that and you use that as an excuse, you'll never act and you'll never do the things you should be doing to grow your business to then be in a better position. But as a whole, I think there's a culture at the moment, especially in the corporate land or like the larger scale stuff, where people are maybe looking to cut headcounts, where they're like, actually, what can an AI agent do for me? So if you are a solo entrepreneur, maybe working with those businesses or in general yourself, you should be utilizing it, and you should be seeing how you can utilize it to make yourself more efficient and more valuable. And then what will end up happening, I think, is actually you'll find you'll get more of the economic reward of that value, in my view. And I think for me, I think that's something which we're not quite there with yet. I think the system, the corporation, the how we outsource, etc., hasn't quite caught up, and we haven't. There's some businesses that are, but the majority, talking broadly, I don't think they figured that out yet. I think they will, given time, but I don't think we're quite there yet, in my view. I mean, for those who are maybe interested, where can people find you? Where's best to connect with you? If they want to look at sort of see your training, they want to see maybe talk to you about running their socials, that kind of thing. Where's best to connect with you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, Daniel Bull on LinkedIn, to search me on there. Feel free to connect. Your social media consultant on Facebook and on Instagram as well. So those are the best places, really, particularly LinkedIn and Facebook are the best places to connect with me. So, say, looking for service-based business owners that are on their own, frustrated with social media, need help and support, and I'll be your personal trainer, if you like. You know, I'll give you that tough love and that support that you need, and I'll be there with you every step of the way. And hopefully that wasn't too corny, but would love to connect with more people.
Fantastic. And if you were going to wind the clock back 10 years, maybe 15 years, and you were talking to the Dan who was there, right? The person who maybe hadn't started a business yet, or was in the first couple of years of starting the business, depending on whether you're doing 10 or 15, what would you say to him?
Believe in yourself more.
Thank you for your time, Dan.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
No, you're welcome. And if you did enjoy this piece and you'd like to see more like it, make sure to leave me a comment on what you thought, and of course you can subscribe and etc. and all those lovely YouTube things as well. But thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me, and I'll see you very, very soon.